You're watching the award-winning GHS-TV, a nationally recognized student television station.
Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of GHS-TV's award-winning talk show, Crosstalk. I'm your host, Rachel Christopherson. Each week in this time slot, we take a look at different issues, personalities, and events that affect you and our community. In the late 1960s, Memphis was one of the last cities in the U.S. to end segregation in schools. Unlike other cities, Memphis started desegregating elementary schools first. 13 brave students and their parents agreed to integrate 4 Memphis schools. They are known as the Memphis 13. Their story was made into a documentary by Professor Daniel Kiel, a professor at the University of Memphis Cecil C. Humphrey School of Law. Here's a snippet of that documentary, The Memphis 13.
A half-century ago, 13 pioneers accomplished something that had never been done in the city of Memphis. Their story is unique in the fight for desegregation. For unlike most stories which feature grown men and women battling for equality, these pioneers were barely 6 years old. Yet they set a course to freedom that would affect the generations who followed their footsteps. In May 1954, the United States Supreme Court declared in Brown v. Board of Education that in the field of public education, separate but equal has no place. The Brown decision threatened to upset the entire social order of the South. On the momentum of the Brown decision, the civil rights movement marched forward in Montgomery and Greensboro and Nashville. Yet in Memphis, public schools remained completely segregated. Facing such an action, the local branch of the NAACP took action.
All we wanted was equity in education. We wanted those kids to get the same facilities, the same teaching as far as quality is concerned. Resources generally have followed white children in public schools.
The NAACP came together with an idea which they hoped would avoid violence completely.
We thought we would do something different, and that is start with first grade. In all the other places, they started with high school. Our contention was that, no, those white high schoolers are already tainted. First graders, no. Let's go with first grade.
Bruce, Gordon, Roselle, and Springdale, taking place during the first week of October. A small group of civil rights leaders led by Maxine and Vasco Smith, Russell Sugarman, and others set out into the neighborhoods of Memphis searching for volunteers for their cause.
I might have been, like a lot of parents, afraid to send my child to school, especially police had to be stationed outside the school and my child got to be transported to school, you know, that'll make you, probably make you scared and wonder, you know.
Well, I thought it was an honor for him to be chosen to do this, you know, so that's the reason I agreed. And he wasn't afraid to do this. He was told what was going to happen, you know.
On October 3rd, 1961, more than 7 years after Brown versus Board of Education was decided, and after nearly a century of legally mandated segregation in the Memphis city schools, 13 very small African-American pioneers entered 4 formerly all-white schools. 13 young children blazed a trail of courage for their generation. It is up on their small shoulders that progress was built.
Joining us now is the distinguished professor behind the documentary, Daniel Kiel. Daniel, thank you for talking with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I want to start off by saying that the whole Memphis 13 documentary is very powerful. What about the Memphis 13 story inspired you?
I think what inspired me most was the fact that I'm from Memphis and that I grew up in schools that had black students and white students, and I learned a lot about desegregation in other places, and I rarely learned anything about desegregation in Memphis. And so as I began to learn more, I went through law school. I found that it was really a fascinating story, especially because of the use of the children, of first graders. And I think that once I got to know some of these people, their stories just captured me entirely. So.
Well, the students who were part of the Memphis 13 obviously experienced the most impact. How did they feel walking through the doors of an all-white elementary school for the first time?
I think it's really hard to imagine what they were thinking because they were 5- and 6-year-old children. And so these were students who had gone to school already in all-black schools. And for some reason, and some of the parents explained to them what was going on, others kind of just said, on Monday you're going to go to a different school. I think that I'm not sure how much they understood exactly what was going on when they first walked into those schools, but I think that they probably recognized it pretty quickly, that their classrooms looked very different than they had the week before in the all-black schools. And I know that as they describe it both as being overwhelming, but also recognizing the distinctions between the schools, the textbooks being nicer, the facilities being nicer. So they recognize that distinction even at such a young age.
Well, the parents of these students also made a brave decision in letting their children be pioneers in the desegregation of schools. Why do you think they made that decision?
I'm glad you asked about the parents because, like I said, the kids are 5 and 6 years old. It's the parents who are the ones that are making this brave decision. And the truth is, I spoke with maybe 4 parents, and they all had different reasons. So some were civil rights leaders, some were lawyers for the NAACP, and they felt like it was their obligation as leaders of the Memphis black community to utilize their own children. Others didn't seem like they were making a social statement at all. They were more, it was convenient, it was closer to home. They wanted their child to be as close to them as possible. Others still did want to participate, but weren't otherwise active in the civil rights movement, and they saw this as their opportunity to take a stand.
Why did Memphis begin the desegregation process in elementary schools?
I think to understand why they chose first grade, you have to know the story of the Little Rock school desegregation, which of course began with high school at Central High School about 4 years earlier. And Little Rock had become and is still known as this really confrontational story with a governor standing against the desegregation of Central High School, and it blew up into this international crisis, really. And I think Memphis wanted to avoid that kind of notoriety, and the thought was that first graders wouldn't arouse the same kinds of emotions and the same kinds of publicity as the high schoolers had in Little Rock. And so there was every effort made, not only by choosing the younger children, but also by controlling the media, by getting the police on board in terms of protecting the students as opposed to obstructing, as was the case in Little Rock. And so every effort was made to project order in the Memphis desegregation. And order, of course, occurred, but that doesn't mean that the emotional experience of the students was any less traumatic. It was just less public.
Well, what all went into making the Memphis 13 documentary?
The documentary process began with research into the history. So when I was in law school in particular, I was going through some of the sort of official version of events of Memphis school desegregation, and I recognized that there was a gap. The gap was that you could read school board minutes, you could read court cases, but it was missing the human element. And so when I was back in Memphis, I started trying to fill that gap by reaching out to these people, these heroes really of our community who were really largely unknown. And from there it was just kind of one after the other, and as I got, they would connect me to one another to the extent they could, and then it's just the hard work of cutting the film down, because it's a 35-minute film, but there's, I think, 25 hours of wonderful footage that has to be cut down.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Great, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Roughly 50 years ago, 6 African American students walked through the doors of Germantown High School, hoping for a new beginning. 3 of them shared their stories with student reporter Deborah Noel and videographer Andreas Williams in this report.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
To me, equality is everybody having the same thing, but that's not necessarily also what's fair.
Everyone having the same rights and being able to live amongst each other equally.
Equality and diversity, 2 things that Germantown High School prides itself on. And since its founding in 1910, GHS has become one of the most diverse schools in Shelby County, but it hasn't always been this way. Mary Wooldridge, Evelyn Jones, and Jerry Gardner are 3 of the first 6 African Americans who attended and integrated Germantown High School back in 1966.
We were selected from the elementary school across the railroad tracks in Shelby as the 6 students with top grades to start that integration desegregation period.
Although these select few were the cream of the crop, their limits were further tested when they enrolled at Germantown High School and faced the ugly side of integration, racism.
Sitting in class, spitballs in the back of my head, down the hallways after changing class, racial slurs.
You're not welcome. That was my biggest thing, being made to feel not welcome.
Despite the daily discrimination, they each found someone they could confide in and trust.
I had the PE teacher. Her name was Mrs. Finner. She was a friend of my family, and she just took a extra interest in me, made sure I was okay.
Fast forward 50 years. Germantown High School's African American population has tripled, and according to K12niche.com, GHS holds an A average in ethnic and economic diversity.
I absolutely think that Germantown is a diverse school.
I should take a class with people from 5 different countries.
I do think it's a diverse school based on all the different clubs and activities and the things that cater to the unique interests of the entire school.
Those 6 African American alumni, without knowing it, made a huge impact on the lives of future GHS students.
I would thank them.
Everything that they've done has started to improve the way that we live.
Without them just wanting to go here, I would probably never have the opportunity to be here.
Now, let's hear more from 2 of the 6 Germantown alumni, Jerry Gardner and Mary Wooldridge. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as the first 6 Black students who attended Germantown High, you all exhibited extreme bravery in difficult circumstances. What motivated you and your classmates to make the move to GHS?
I think it was a combination, first and foremost, of the parental structure, the support of our principals and teachers at Neshoba Elementary, and just the overall grades and the experience that we was headed for, I believe.
Yes, we were selected by the principal and teachers from Neshoba. And we had to have the grades. We couldn't have any C's. We had to live in the community, and we had to have the support of our parents.
Correct.
Well, how were you treated by GHS faculty and students when you got to the school?
Well, some of the faculty weren't kind, and of course, our grades was different from the other grades, but there were some that were nice. Miss Dacus, she's passed away. She was excellent. The physical ed teacher knew my family, so she treated me with kindness and respect. So we did have some, but there were more negative than positive.
I'll agree. The negative was definitely there, and there was some in my particular case. My Latin teacher, Miss Harris, was my biggest supporter, and also the coaches playing sports. That gave me, I guess, more courage than anything, and to be treated, I guess, as well as we could expect on that.
Well, were there any differences between the treatment of the 3 boys and the 3 girls?
Wow. Now, upon finding out things later on, true story, we wasn't treated, could I say, maybe as awkward or as bad as they was. And some maybe after we thought about it, maybe we attributed to, playing basketball, football, running track, maybe set us apart a little bit. And the fact of the matter is that we never saw each other during the day, so we didn't really know what was going on really until we started after the fact and discussing our individual things, because of course then we didn't have cell phones and stuff, so after school it wasn't like we could talk about our daily experiences. So.
Yeah, the main thing was they wanted to do was divide and conquer.
Yeah.
So they put us all in individual classes. So like the guys were more accepted. So the 3 girls, we would meet for lunch under the stairwell,
right,
so that we could tell each other what happened in our classes and, find out really what's going on, just to have the camaraderie, because, the rest of the kids didn't talk to us.
Well, what were your personal experiences like at GHS?
Wow.
Well, like I said, the main thing for us was the lunchtime. We didn't want to go in the cafeteria. We wanted to be able just to talk among ourselves. And of course, we got caught eating up under the stairwell and was admonished. So that cut out a lot of our union.
Well, how did your families feel about you attending GHS?
At the beginning, well, we learned to treat it at that time. Could we say it was well received? Maybe even somewhat of an honor to be chosen with the grades that we had, and things of that nature. And my personal experience is, at the end of the day, I'm glad, that we, was chosen, and we endured it. And so it was an experience. I wouldn't trade it.
Can you talk about the stark differences that you've seen in Germantown High School's environment from 1966 to present day?
Wow.
Night and day, oranges and apples. But that's what we see. We don't know what's underlying.
Right.
Because truly some things has not changed. It perceived on the outside, and that's not on what's really happening on the inside.
And the growth and the structure, what we know as time goes on, things will change anyway. So, but I had to get escorted to the office this morning. So there's a lot of changes.
Well, thank you both for sharing your stories with us.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We've taken a look at 3 of the 6 brave African American students who transferred into what was previously an all-white Germantown High School. However, there was a 4th student who's worth mentioning. Reporter Raina Katko and videographer Tanchia Cho rediscover Melvin Henderson.
Germantown High School has a long history on the court that dates back more than 50 years. However, in 1967, one basketball player stood out from the rest. Over the years, this athlete has been forgotten by the GHS student body, so we went on a journey to rediscover Melvin Henderson.
Melvin was a good-looking, tall, friendly, happy, funny classmate of mine. And
he was just a good guy. And I'm not just saying it because he's my brother. I'm just saying that people tended to gravitate towards him.
Melvin Henderson was a junior when he came to Germantown from what was then Mount Pisgah High School. It was 1967, the height of the Civil Rights Movement.
He was one of the 6 African Americans to first arrive at Germantown after the desegregation.
I was raised in the 1950s in the South. We're not accustomed to black folks and white folks being put together in close social circumstances.
There was a lot of racial turmoil and things going on at that time.
And just being able to see that Melvin, as just a junior coming into an all-white school, that must have been terrifying.
For Melvin, sports became a way to break through the racial barrier.
and he was a star.
He was a dominant athlete.
Melvin played basically every sport out there. I know he played football for 1 year.
He played end, I played tackle, and so we played together 20 games, 7 and 68 football seasons here at Germantown.
Then he was on the basketball team.
Melvin Henderson almost single-handedly demolished Melrose High School in the regional final basketball tournament. Melvin went against Ronnie Robinson and Larry Finch at the very top of their game and came within a hair's breadth of knocking off the finest high school basketball teams in the history of Tennessee.
He went out for the track team, right? And the guy was doing a long jump out there. And Melvin just tried it and went out there and bettered him about 2-3 feet. He didn't even know how to long jump. He just went out there and jumped. That's the kind of athlete he was.
And the fact that he was able to come here and succeed in everything he tried to do is inspirational.
Although he may be gone, Melvin's legacy continues to make an impact at GHS.
As a person of color, I have come to face many struggles in my lifetime, but to know that he was able to push through those struggles and come out to the top, it makes me feel a little bit more secure about what I want to do in life. He's just so courageous.
The courage of Melvin and his other African American classmates shaped the future for current Germantown students.
It's so important to remember the past because his story is a great one and of overcoming obstacles, and I think that can inspire all of us really to just go out there and be the best version of ourselves we could possibly be.
Joining us now is Melvin Henderson's younger brother, Kelvin Henderson. Mr. Henderson, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, Melvin Henderson was one of the very first African-American students at Germantown High School. How did he feel about coming to Germantown and being a pioneer in that regard?
I think Melvin basically wanted what my parents wanted for him, which is to do as well as you could and to have every opportunity that was available to him. So the idea of him coming somewhere where there was more opportunities for him, he was more than receptive to it.
Well, Melvin began to make history at GHS when he decided to branch out and play football. What motivated him to take this first brave step?
Because Melvin went to a predominantly black school, you know, up until that point. Well, Mount Pisgah didn't have a football team. Germantown had a football team. Melvin wanted to explore every opportunity that he had that was available to him. That's where my parents got on board. They were sitting down at the Board of Education every day, all the time, until they got the approval of him being able to go from Mount Pisgah to Germantown. This is what they did because they wanted that for him.
Well, what qualities did you see in your brother that made him such an exceptional student and person?
Very intelligent, but Melvin, one thing about Melvin was very intelligent. I don't think people even realize that part of it. They just realize his athletic ability. Just an amazing athlete. This one guy that never trained, never was able to just go to all of these different places to lift weights and all this stuff. It was just a natural when it was all said and done. But his thing, his love was basketball. But he wanted to try it all. You know, he wanted to try all of it and just see, you know what I mean, what he could do, what he could do, what he couldn't do. That's what he did.
Well, as Melvin's brother, what do you think made him so successful at GHS?
I think that the idea of him just being the kind of guy that he is. Melvin could get along with anyone. You know, I never heard him come home and say that he had a problem, a real problem at Germantown. I think we all have problems to a certain extent, you know, but I never heard him come home and say, you know, tell mom or dad that he had a real problem at Germantown, because people I don't know, they gravitated toward him. They liked him, you know, and he liked people, and that was him.
Well, how do you think Melvin's friendly and driven disposition helped the process of integration go more smoothly at Germantown?
I think you can come to a place and you can say, wow, I got a problem with this person because of their color. I got a problem with this person because of their race. Melvin we were brought up in a household of everyone, treat people like you want to be treated. That's what you want. And if you treat people like you want to be treated, I think you'll find yourself, you know, in a real good place. You know, everybody is not going to see it like that. It's simplistic in its knowledge, but this is what our parents taught us. Treat people like you want to be treated.
Well, did Melvin experience any hardships while making his way at GHS?
If he did, it was never brought to the house. It was never said. Melvin's best friend went to college with him, Buddy Morton. You know, Melvin didn't want to go to college without him. You know, so Melvin picked the college that would take Buddy Morton with him. And that's the reason he was at the University of New Orleans. That's why he went there. They went together. They were almost inseparable at the time. At that point in time, that's where he wanted to go. You know, he wanted him to go with him. So, and that's Melvin.
Well, Mr. Henderson, thank you so much for sharing Melvin's story with us.
All right, you're welcome. You're more than welcome. I appreciate you guys having me on.
I'd like to thank my guests again for sharing their knowledge and experiences with me today. Shelby County Schools would be very different today without the courageous students who integrated our local schools. Remember, Crosstalk can be seen each week at 9:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. on Mondays and Thursdays, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 a.m., and 12 p.m. and 7 p.m. on Sundays. For more information on our programming, please check us out on the web at GHS-TV.org, where we are streaming live 24 hours a day. You can also check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Rachel Christopherson. From all of us at GHS-TV, thank you for watching Crosstalk, and I hope to see you again.